We'll begin with Chapter 1, Segment 1, which introduces the learning theory. The learning theory was introduced during the 1880s, and this theory investigates learning and behavior principles by studying animals in the lab. This is important to understand learning and behavior. So we then move on to Rene Descartes, who raised philosophical questions. He questions if humans were actually like machines, and he touches upon the concept of dualism, comparing the mind and human body to extensions of the physical world. He also proposed the principle of reflex actions, where he explains body activities and direct connections. And on this section, he actually compares a doctor dropping a hammer on a knee, and a person's knee would move, obviously. We then move on to someone else called Thomas Hobbes, who explained that the mind follows physical laws, and he explains something called hedonism, which is the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. We then move on to two famous people who were known as British empiricists, and they are known as a group of philosophers who believe that the mind is built up from a person's experiences. These philosophers have an atomist view, which means that a simple input could be combined to be built up into complex ideas. So on the left here we have John Locke, who introduced us to the idea that the mind is a blank space, also known as the tabula rasa, and he also founded the School of Empiricism. On the right here we have David Hume, who emphasized the importance of association, the connection between two or more things. We are then introduced to Immanuel Kant, who has to do with the idea of rationalism, which is that the mind is thought to act on experience. He believed that things existed in our mind before we actually experience it. He then goes on to say that these things, also called ideas, are also known as a prioris, which mold and organize our ideas in our mind. Moving on to biological roots. During the middle 1800s, psychologists were interested in figuring out how reflexes actually work. And in this section, we are introduced to several people, including Ivan Shinov, who believed that thoughts are reflexive responsive to stimuli. And from that idea, we move on to Charles Darwin, who introduced the concept of evolution. So the topic of evolution actually went a long way and was taken over by early comparative psychologists who traced evolution of the mind by studying mental lives of animals. One of these psychologists, known as C. Lloyd Morgan, was actually concerned with mental abilities of animals, and he took it upon himself to study his own dog and his spatial abilities. He is also known for Morgan's canon, which encompasses the law of parsimony.